This is Seven Blind Mice Part 2. So, in the last one, when we were reading this, we talked about how different perspective each mouse was only going to see or figure out by touching a certain part and try and figure out what was in front of them, what something was in front of them. And they only saw their own part. And I only showed you parts of this book so that you would have to try and figure out what it was. Now, if you didn't go ahead or look at something online or hadn't read the book before, it might have been quite difficult to figure out. Well, we're going to read the whole thing today so that you can have a whole picture, a whole combined perspective. Ed Young's Seven Blind Mice. One day, 7 blind mice were surprised to find a strange something by their pond. "What is it?" they cried, and they all ran home. Now, see, on page 1, you would have figured it out. You would have looked at this and you would have said, "Oh my goodness, I know exactly what it is." But that kind of gives it away. And I'd rather that you get to try and figure it out from the blind mouse's perspective. On Monday, Red Mouse went first to find out. And of course, he ran over to this leg. And all he could figure out was something that he knew from his past. And in the past, he knew something like this, sturdy, this tall, this shape. It was a pillar, he said, and no one believed him. Tuesday, Green Mouse set out. He was the second to go. And when he came across the trunk, all he had was his prior experience. And he's like, "Well, the only thing I've come across before that was kind of like this was a snake." "It's a snake," he said. "No," said Yellow Mouse on Wednesday. So when he went out and he got this tusk, he's like, "Well, it's got to be a spear. That's the only thing I have in my memory that would feel like this." He was the third in turn. The fourth was Purple Mouse. He went on Thursday, and he's running all the way over the top. And when he runs all the way over the top, he's like, "It's got to be a giant cliff, a great cliff," which would make sense. It's all he's ever been on that would be like that. Orange Mouse went on Friday, the fifth to go, and as he's running over the ear's moving. So he thinks, "Well, the only thing I know that moves like that is a fan. It's got to be a fan. I felt it move." The sixth to go was Blue Mouse, and Blue Mouse is holding on to the tail. And this raggedy tail, well, it feels like it's got to be a rope of some kind. He went on Saturday and said, "It's nothing but a rope." But the others didn't agree. They began to argue. Now, why did they argue? They argued because they only had their own perspective. They only looked at one piece of the whole. They didn't look at the whole of the elephant. They didn't look at everything that was in front of them. And they didn't use everyone's part to create their whole opinion. They only used the one piece. So they thought it was a snake, a rope, a fan, a cliff. Until on Sunday, when White Mouse, the seventh mouse, went to the pond and thought, "I think I'm going to try and put this all together." When she came upon this something, she ran up one side and down the other. She ran across the top from one end to end. So she's deciding to take all the pieces and put them together. "Ah," said White Mouse. "Now I see. The something is as sturdy as a pillar, as supple as a snake, as wide as a cliff, as sharp as a spear, as breezy as a fan, as stringy as a rope. But all together, the something is an elephant." So together, had they all worked together, they would have figured out that it was an elephant. And when the other mice ran up one side and down the other, across the something from end to end, they agreed. Now they saw too. The Mouse Moral. Knowing in part may make a fine tale, but wisdom comes from seeing the whole. And that's really a good lesson for all of us. We all can only know our own one part. And so a lot of times what we have to do is we have to talk with each other. We have to work with each other. We have to try and figure out, well, what part am I seeing? Am I missing another part? Let's listen to each other. Let's talk it out. Let's try and figure it out to put the whole picture together. It's all about perspective, isn't it? All right. Well, that's the end of Seven Blind Mice by Ed Young.